What's happening, my friend?
Hey, happy week. Happy new week.
That's kind of a dangerous comment to say on a Monday. If you say happy week, how do you know the rest of the week's going to be happy? Or
Right.
are you willing it to be happy? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was going to say happy Monday, but then my mind goes through a quick calculation that this is really supposed to be Tuesday, and
I see.
am I supposed to, break the third wall and say it's Monday, or so then I stutter. So,
Well, we can't make fun of you if you stutter like Biden. Did you watch that town hall thing?
no,
I didn't either, but
What, over the weekend?
I think it was last week he did some town hall
I did not.
where I think the point was to go and, number one, show that he's not a corpse, and number two,
Yeah.
to talk about vaccines. But I heard a lot of negative shit, even from CNN, which you never, I think it was on CNN, but it was like
Okay.
stammering and stuttering and incoherent.
Well, I didn't hear any of that. But so you could just make all of those claims you want.
Well, I always do, right? That he's the walking corpse.
That's funny. I really didn't see anything about him. There was something this morning. The vice president was talking about something. They broke away from the regular news to cover her stuff for a while, but
What is she yammering
I
about?
was eating, so I didn't pay that much attention to it. Let's see, what was it? Was it about infrastructure or something? I don't know. So this is infrastructure week again. So, it's just see, here's the thing. They want to pass infrastructure before the August recess, right? Because what happens is, if you think back to the Affordable Care Act, they didn't get it passed before the August recess, and that gave Republicans time to regroup and lobby and do all kinds of stuff. And so when they came back after the recess, although they did get it passed, it was detrimental to the process.
How long is the recess?
I don't know. I think it's till September or something. So, or maybe even December. I'm not sure.
What if we eliminate congressional recesses?
What if we just send them to kindergarten where they actually have recess every day?
Like you get recess twice a day.
I don't think it would make a goddamn bit of difference at this point,
What do you? What's your take on the co-president? Are you finding her work to be satisfactory thus far?
So far, I mean, she, to me, it seems like she has a couple of jobs. One is to be there in case Joe Biden passes away.
The primary job.
Yeah, the primary
right?
job. And then along the way, evidently, she's supposed to do whatever he throws her way to do. And so far, so good. I mean, she seems to like him. And, so when she introduces him or refers to him, it seems genuine.
Is it that, or is she more like salivating that he could drop dead on the stage right here and he'll be sworn in by dinner?
The funny thing about that is, and this is just a gift for you, so Merry Christmas. She does seem happy all the time, so it seems like a vice president feels she's close to the
Right.
to the next step.
Well, I know the big thing. I know this because this is one of the smear campaigns that you see from Fox News, is that she was given the task of the border control. So I know that's one of her primary responsibilities. But is she in charge of the infrastructure negotiations, or is she just taking that upon herself to try to help sell it?
No, they were both at something today where she was making a short speech, and then she was introducing not the president but somebody else, and they were both standing there at the dais, whatever this was. And I only caught part of it. So I think that they have struggled with infrastructure because, for sure, and I guess she's on board with it, they want to exhaust. First off, I think they would truly like to have this be some kind of bipartisan situation in
I thought that was gaining momentum.
Well, I mean, it just depends who you talk to.
What's the package worth now? What's
every week? Well, I mean, there's some compromise. There's still a lot, and then whatever's not in this is supposed to be made up in a separate reconciliation bill, which won't be bipartisan. So hard to know if you even have the Democrats you need for that right at this point. So I think that theoretically, you don't have to pass any of this stuff right now before this recess, but just history tells us that it strengthens the other side if you don't get this stuff done in this block of time. And, as far as infrastructure, I mean, I think they call it a bipartisan bill because there's bipartisan support across the country. The only place it's not bipartisan is in the Senate.
Well, the last time I think you and I spent any considerable amount of time on it, and I really haven't dove into the details, the big issue back then a couple months ago was the total price tag, and that it included things that maybe weren't necessarily infrastructure. So, bridges and roads versus paid family
Healthcare,
leave, shit like that.
Yeah. I think some of that's going to get pushed over to, I think, some of the non-traditional infrastructure stuff. And I think the reason why there's been some optimism, late, the last few days about the possibility of this moving forward is that it looks like some of that's going to get pushed and covered in this reconciliation bill, which we don't know will happen or not. But, it's kind of, to me, it looks like, they went for the gusto. They went for the big bill. I mean, there was a lot of populist stuff going on in the Republican Party over the last administration, but not a little different, right? This was more populism along the more traditional Democratic lines, right? Beef up entitlements and, stuff like that. And the non-hard infrastructure items, the non-bridges and roads and things like that. So I think there's a real desire to get that done so that they can still drive to the Capitol. I mean, the fucking roads are falling apart. Bridges are collapsing in front of our very eyes. So, as a social liberal, I'm in favor of probably all the other things that they talked about in that. It's just a matter of where the money's coming from. And even then, I'm not positive where the money's supposed to come from.
They're just going to print it
for this one. Well, that's okay. I mean, if they're that's the next best thing to just be taxing
What
it.
do you think? When you came in here this morning, it's raining in July here in SoCal, which is kind of weird. You said, "Oh, climate change." Are you saying climate change is happening? It's not happening because we're having rain, which we need, by the way. And I don't know if that was any significant rain today.
Not much. That's the problem with rain in July, right? It doesn't put any rain anywhere that it stays, like in the snowpack.
But is there any climate change stuff in these infrastructure bills?
Yeah, well, there would be in the original.
Which was what?
Lot.
I mean, if we're building bridges and roads, presumably widening highways.
Yeah, money for green technologies, that would help the environment. Money for green investing by the government, to try to promote industries that will be climate positive but create jobs at the same time.
But there's not anything concrete, no pun intended.
There's nobody you can pay to fix right. There's no place to send the money that will fix. I mean, you have to think about investing in policies and programs that you feel will promote, things that are better for the climate or the world or whatever. Frankly, I got bad news for you. I think we're too late.
Do you?
Well,
are you one of these guys that what's the narrative? Is it 2 or 3 degrees? Maybe it's not even that high, like 1.5 degrees Celsius. If the climate raises to that level, then it's irreversible damage, and we're all going to die.
I don't know if I'm one of the. I don't claim to be a scientist, but I mean, I think
for anybody just tuning in to today's podcast, just claim it.
Yeah,
Dr. Watkins.
I'm an amateur scientist.
Yeah, let's start over. We're joined today by our guest, Dr. Watkins. He's a climatologist and he's an expert. He's got a PhD and
I'm probably more well known by Dr. Watson from my previous literary life. Here's the thing, right? I mean, we're seeing the results, and I don't know whether they're irreversible or not, but certainly the uptick in wildfires and things like that, especially in California. I mean, there's a huge fire that's been burning for weeks now up at the California-Oregon border. It's a little, maybe a touch over 25% contained theoretically, and it's supposed to burn well into August.
And
it's changing.
If the Oregonians can put out the fire, we should give them that piece of land from California. Just gift it to them.
Ready?
Yeah. Why not?
I don't care. It's fine with me.
No bullshit. I read this article this weekend about scientists in Dubai who were using drone technology, sending it up in the clouds and administering some electromagnetic pulse to make to make it rain.
Some actual rain seeding.
Yeah, and apparently the technology works, and I don't know how long they've been doing this. It just happened to stumble across this article, and it produces a significant amount of downpour, which is just moisture. It's obviously not changing the climate, but one of the things that naturally we worry about in an ever warming environment is the lack of water and more desert regions growing and what the impact of that is. So if you could artificially produce water out of clouds, that's fucking cool.
Well, a couple things. And again, even though you did introduce me as a scientist, I actually am not. My theory about water is there's a finite amount of water on the planet. And my mother-in-law will often say in her wizened ways, hey, you're wasting water. Well, I mean, here's the thing. Water is part of a cycle. You can't waste water. You can change its form and it'll go somewhere else. You can turn it into gas. You can turn it into steam. You can turn it into ice, but the water's all there. And
isn't frankly, everything all here? Isn't that all matter is?
Yeah, I mean, there's X amount of water here.
What is that phrase called, Dr. Watkins?
What's that?
That all matter is something there's something, the theory,
you can't
right?
Destroy energy. I don't know. That's the common science fiction. But I mean, I think what we're going to see is that so it's not a matter of, hey, there's less water, so things are more arid in California. The water is going somewhere else because the weather patterns of the earth are changing. So instead of, water freezing in these mountains and rain happening at this time of the year over here, those things are changing, and that's going to cause other changes like ice cap melting and things like that. We're losing significant amounts of frozen water out of different places, right?
And let me ask you this, Doctor, because that doesn't really seem that big of a deal to me. And in other words,
you don't live on the beach, that's why.
Well, it'll make the beach real estate more affordable, I guess. But I don't know why we're not investing more heavily in desalination. I mean, if the oceans are rising and we need water, for everything from irrigation to drinking water, then it seems to me like we have enough water source. We have, I don't know why we're not building that technology.
Why aren't we just capturing the water that's about to fall? I mean, I mean, in California, apparently it's damn near impossible to build a reservoir or any kind of dam or
for legal reasons.
Yeah, even it's almost impossible to build a catch basin for water to capture rainwater because of the regulatory impacts, the costs of what do they call it? Going through the Coastal Commission or
too many goddamn
impact.
commissions.
Yeah, it's like, hey, and even to increase capacity on existing reservoirs, which are sometimes in kind of, far-flung podunk kind of areas of the state, right? It just to do minor stuff that would increase capacity so a given reservoir could hold more water can cost millions of dollars that those counties or cities don't have.
What is the Democratic talking point about that issue? It's obviously a democratically controlled state. All these boards, are run by environmentalists, so why can't they figure that shit out?
I don't know. I think personally, I mean, I don't know that there's a direct cause and effect here, but I think that so much political will and stuff has been spent over the last, let's call it 15 years, on shit like trains and stuff like that.
Which is that train we have or whatever it's doing is fucking ridiculous.
I think
does nothing.
I think that at the risk of not being funny, I think that it's an example of what happens in a state that in a government that's lost its checks and balances. And because there are no checks or balances in California regarding, the will of Democrats or Republicans in this state, it's a super Democrat majority. Stupid, ridiculous things like the train get out of control. Billions are earmarked and spent, and by Sacramento politicians for the most part, right? You know where all the money is going to end up that was earmarked for trains and doesn't go to trains. It's going to end up in the Bay Area transit system in BART, and that was probably always the plan.
Because they need to rehab it?
Well, because first you have to get money allocated. Then when it doesn't go, and that's hard in states that especially back when this stuff was starting, we're in a state where, tax revenues were falling. And so, to get money earmarked and get matching money from the federal government for high-speed rail in this state, right, that brought a lot of money to the table. Now, geez, does anybody see any high-speed rail being built?
No, and think about
money,
that.
But the money's still at the table, and that money will end up being distributed through, and it won't be in L.A., trust me. It'll be in Sacramento because that's the way it works, right, in the Bay Area Transit. And that's just unfortunate because, that same political will, effort, and the amount of money that has been wasted and will be wasted, or be diverted, could have significantly impacted the amount of water we can capture from rain in this state. And, while we're in a drought, what is it, Chicago? What state is it back east or on the East Coast or something that's more flooded than normal? I mean, it's just the water's just moving, right?
Yeah, it's moving. We say that about the weather patterns too, kind of what you were just describing. It feels like to me in SoCal that things are basically a month off. They're a month delayed, where we're still, if August was the hottest month of the year, before, now it's like September is the hottest month, or even the first half of October.
Can be tough.
And we're still pretty warm in December. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not uncommon for us to have 80-degree days in December. We really don't start to cool down until January, February. March is colder now than I really ever remember.
I think that June and July in California this year have been significantly
It's July
different,
and it's raining.
which is very unusual, right? And really not worth a shit. I mean, that's not no answer to any kind of drought or anything, right? That's
you don't have to fill your pool today.
It didn't rain that much.
But go back to this infrastructure thing,
Yeah.
the bill. Wouldn't it make sense that in this day and age we would put money towards a high-speed rail that goes from coast to coast? Never mind this bullshit rail that we have in California that starts nowhere and goes nowhere. But if we're really talking about, say, cross-country travel and airplanes, isn't that probably one of the earliest things that you could identify that we would need is the ability to travel throughout the great landmass of this country on a high-speed rail?
I don't know, man. I'm not a transportation, I don't know that much about transportation when it comes to
Is that being
kind of stuff.
discussed? Have you heard?
No, not really. I think that, I'm not sure that rail is being looked at in this country as the answer
future
to transportation issues, right?
What was the thing?
It's kind of 2-century-old technology, right?
Well, it is, obviously, and the railroad's constructed in this country. But think about, places like Europe, Japan, they rely on high-speed rail.
Yeah,
What's the technology in the fly?
None of those places is that private business, is that private enterprise, right? No place that has high-speed rail is that any kind of private enterprise. And I don't hear anybody suggesting that the government should run
rail
or any kind of transportation system.
What about the billionaires? What's your take? Did we talk about this? What's your take on the dick rocket?
A waste of time. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, we sent the first people into space, right? And they did all the dangerous stuff. These guys did nothing. They slingshotted a
Where did they even
capsule, a dick, a thing that looks like a cock up into the barely touched space and came back down, and they're throwing themselves parties. I think they're idiots.
So this whole thing, Richard Branson beat Jeff Bezos by like a week, right?
Should have beat him off.
Well, maybe that was the whole point with the shape of his rocket. But what do they just go to the edge of space? What does that even mean? So they're going up to where are they? Are they experiencing anti-gravity? Are they going? They're not going so high that there's re-entry issues with heat.
These are the most expensive yellow Corvettes anybody's ever seen, right? These guys are going through, all three of them are going through midlife crisis.
Who's the third? Oh, Elon.
Elon, right?
Yeah.
So,
is there no good that can come out of a dick rocket going into space? And aren't some of these guys also, maybe it's Elon, isn't he working with NASA?
Well, Elon has probably, if anybody doesn't understand that, he's got the more advanced, thing here going on. I mean, at least there, you know, it's not him flying up into space and all this. Well, he does talk about going to Mars.
I think he said he would.
Good riddance. But here's the thing, right? These other two yahoos, I mean, Bezos is just, it's just what he is, right? He's just a dipshit. And
is that why, though? Is that why there's such uproar about another billionaire going into space with a rocket shaped like a dick, and he's a dick, and he's arrogant, and he's not paying? He makes 500 billion times more than his workers, and he's just this guy with a midlife crisis who wants to go in his yellow dick Corvette into space.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't him, if it was Bill Gates, if it was Bill Gates, does he still have a good reputation or no? Let's say it was Bill Gates last year, and he goes into space.
No, Bill Gates
that better?
has lost all of his, you know, his moral high ground, right? He's, you know, it turns out that, you know, while he was preaching to the world about, you know, how things should be and what we should and shouldn't be doing, and because he's a billionaire and he knows a lot, he was cheating on his wife and doing things that
was it really cheating? It sounded to me like they had some agreement.
You know,
he had some deal where he could go visit and have a weekend with the other woman like every year for the whole entire time he was married to Melinda.
Well, I mean, he had a strong board of directors, right? Microsoft had a strong board of directors. When he stepped down, that was, you know, the PR on that was one thing, but the reality of it was another. The reality of it was that, unlike Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, Microsoft has a strong board, and they told him, "You're out. You're a net negative for the company. Your crappy choices in your personal life have made you unsuitable."
But okay, let me just. He ended up being, I think, arguably a net positive for society for many, many years after his firing from the board. Right, with the, as far as I know, I haven't seen anything to the contrary, where the foundation donated a lot of money to third world countries for the development of, you know, progress and vaccines and all that shit, right?
It's all good. You know,
it's all good. So here's where I'm going with this. Is there any possible good that can come out of the billionaire space race other than these guys with their big egos?
Here's a newsflash for you. There hasn't been much since Tang. Okay.
Tang, you mean the drink?
Yeah. Once we
did you ever follow? Did you always spice it up a little bit more? I mean, it's whatever this 1 scoop to 8 ounces of water. It's like, let me just go a scoop and a half.
It doesn't work in screwdrivers. That's all I can tell you. It's a crappy breakfast drink. You know, I'm a huge proponent of the space program and stuff, but this current version of it I really don't care if private companies want to get into space flight and take advantage of, and rightfully so, whatever, you know, I mean, you can't expect companies like to do that without there being some profit motive, and that's fine. That's what everything's based on. All this nonsense with them flying up in the rockets and stuff, it's just, I just think it's bad optics, and it
is bad optics. I agree with you. I'm not. We're kind of really close on this, but I have to think, even the dick rocket, which looks ridiculous, if Jeff Bezos didn't get on the rocket, you know, and he let his crew do it, would it have carried more legitimacy because, you know, he paid for it, but he's not the guy racing to get up there and say, I did that?
This is the bad optic, that this is a very expensive, you know, dangerous, for all intents and purposes.
Will you say with the text conversation we had?
What's that?
The morning of the launch?
Dude, I wish you would crash.
I sent you a text asking if you secretly are wishing it would crash, and you said...
I didn't see the text till after he'd already come back successfully.
I
slept through that one. And I just thought I'd answer honestly. I don't really... Yeah. Yes, I wanted him to crash. But here's the problem for me why this doesn't look good for either one of them is there was no real... They accomplished nothing. I mean... There wasn't a first to be had. I mean, Chuck Yeager went damn near that far into space. Pilots...
The SR-71 spy plane routinely flew it. It was like 80,000 feet.
Yeah, I mean, they barely touched the edge of space.
It was a badass
right?
plane.
Yeah. And Branson's thing was kind of cool since it was plain like, right? And at least it didn't look like a dick. And Bezos, I don't know. Maybe he never looked at it. I don't. At some point, hey, can we make this look a little more Buck Rogers and a little less?
Yeah. Well, I mean, would you have to like sharpen out the cone to make it more pointed? I don't know.
Put it in the middle of the rocket and make it like a satellite. I don't know. But
he did have his cowboy hat on.
Don't put a helmet on the fucking thing. Jesus Christ. I don't know what to say about that. I just think that was but besides all that kind of funny stuff, the idea that Branson and Bezos spent millions and millions of dollars to shoot themselves into space and drag some people along with it diminishes the huge accomplishments of the people that did it 50 years ago. I mean, there's
You think so? Why?
Because there was virtually. First off, they didn't accomplish anything. It wasn't like they were on some kind of,
Well, did with the NASA programs, with the Apollo missions and the space shuttles, did we accomplish something the very first time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so many things besides Tang, right?
And space food. Do we have the frozen space food?
So
the space pen.
Yeah.
Right upside down.
Well, I mean, those were actual firsts, right? And those were actual opportunities to see the world from space for the first time, to photograph the planet.
You mean
from
we needed to finally
capsule.
prove that the Earth was round?
Well, I mean, all those things, right? And these guys did none of that. I mean, they didn't do anything that hasn't been done several hundred times already.
Now they didn't. So, I don't know how often they plan on doing this. How about the crew?
Let's do it till both of them are dead. Okay.
How about the crew? Were these legitimate people, peers in your science community?
Oh, the Branson. I mean, on the Bezos flight, one was the child of a billionaire who paid $28 million for the kid to go. One was an 88-year-old woman aviator.
No way.
Yeah.
This last launch, so he was 88?
Yeah.
Wow.
She was in the space program, but then was told at some point in the space program that you're never going to space because you're a woman. So, thank God Jeff Bezos took it on himself to right that wrong and dragged
there you go.
Dragged this 80-year-old woman up into space.
But ma'am, you're finally going to get your chance to go into space. Yeah. But there's one caveat.
You have to go with me.
And you have to ride on a dick.
Yeah, in a dick. In a dick. She could think of herself as a small sperm.
Maybe that's what it felt like.
And then the other asshole that went was Jeff Bezos' brother. So I mean, I don't see the point. I mean,
so what? This lady, so she was in NASA all these years ago.
Yeah,
and is she a credible person? Is she a credible scientist?
She's an old woman now who got screwed back during her working years at NASA because they just simply weren't taking women into space, right? The astronaut program was all guys.
Well, let me throw this out there. I mean, when you look at the Apollo missions and the space shuttle, is it, and what we're doing now by comparison, or what these guys are doing, with the Dick rocket and the airplane and what Musk is doing, these are reusable, returnable vehicles, right? So is it cleaner? Is it better? And is the idea that we'll be able to use this technology in a way that we can actually do something and get data and make it useful? I mean, is that not, a possibility?
I mean, again, Musk has already sent up multiple, vehicles carrying, kinds of people for real reasons, right? To get stuff to the International Space Station and everything. And I mean, space tourism, is that what they call it? I mean, it's just a stupid business, and there's not going to be much in the way of investment. No matter what, it's not really scalable. And who gives a shit if there's some opportunity for the billionaires in this world to buy a flight on a fucking spacecraft? I just think that is the incredibly short-sighted vision of dipshits like Bezos and Branson and Musk, for that matter, that's of some kind of importance. I mean, in the face of everything and all the criticisms that they're going through right now in the governmental stage and the world stage and for some of their other stupid endeavors and self-serving projects, that they make it possible for billionaires to buy their way into space. Wow, thank you so much. Everybody was waiting for that.
But did you just say that Musk's rocket took people to the International Space Station? Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, hit the actual.
Do we need an International Space Station?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, we need to build a new one. This one's about to time out.
Doesn't it leak?
This one's about to age. What does it leak? I don't know.
Doesn't have space radiation get in there?
DPR.
But why do we need an International Space Station? Why do we need to send people there to go hang out and do that and write upside down with their space pen?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of research that happens from the space station. I mean, there's still things to learn, and for possible, as we need a way to get people off this planet and into space that doesn't take a virtual nuclear bomb underneath a little helmet-shaped capsule to shoot the thing into space. I mean, we need a better way. I personally am a big fan of the space elevator. I want to see
the space elevator.
Yeah, I want to see. I want to see
Disneyland.
I want to see a space. I want to see a space platform in geosynchronous orbit, tied to the Earth with diamond strings. These strings made out of diamond that will keep this. You'll be able to run an elevator up out of the Earth's atmosphere instead of blowing off a giant bomb every time. You'll just get into the elevator thing, press up for 150 billion, and you'll go straight up to the thing.
Well, that's some pretty crazy sci-fi shit. But I was starting to say a few minutes ago about the technology in the movie The Fly. Brundlefly. He goes in the machine, and he's like teleporting himself somewhere, and it breaks down his atoms or whatever, and then reforms them over here. But then the fly gets in the teleporter, and that's how he turns into Brundlefly. Right. So, why can't we? I mean, if these billionaires were taking these little mini modules and figuring out a way to break down our molecules and reform us somewhere, some space and some time away, would that be acceptable to you as a way to spend their billions?
Especially if they were the first ones.
Would that be considered green technology?
Probably not. I don't know why I got the hiccups, man. Sorry, folks. I guess I've yet to burp into the mic, but it's come close.
It's early.
Wow. I don't know, dude.
It is. I don't know what they're doing either. I'm not making an argument.
I like the lightheartedness of the questions, though.
And the question really is, you said the word optics, and I think that's really what's at play here. In the same calendar year, the ex-wife of Bezos is probably donated $6 billion. Mm-hmm. And, then the other guy is on the extreme and seen as the evil empire of capitalism. And then he's making
Amazon, Bezos?
Yeah. And then he's making 1 billion times more than his employees. And he's spending his jerk off money on building dick rockets. And he's an evil human.
It was Bezos that it said that he could put $105,000 into the account of every Amazon employee, and by the time that was actually accomplished, the money would have regenerated, and he'd have more money than he had before the pandemic. So it's just like the numbers are staggering, and who cares? I'm not advocating that should be done.
He has so much money that he can fund the entire federal government for a whopping 12 days.
Is that what you heard?
There's another thing I read about that.
And I don't think that means anything, to be honest with you. I just think that these guys are just. I mean, they're phenomena, right? And it's not good. And the fact that they're clueless to the optics and pursue these individual. I mean, Elon Musk, at least his seems to have some. I mean, is the eventual ability to conduct space tourism, is that worth anything to us?
Well, I don't know. But don't we need these crazy, eccentric, brilliant billionaires to do shit? Like, build electric cars and space rockets and
something, I guess.
Tunnels. I don't know, but are we all benefiting from the technology at some point?
They're all such offensive, egomaniac. What'd you call it the other day? Well, I mispronounced the word. It's nihilist, right?
Nihilist,
yeah,
but isn't that I only know it from the Big Lebowski. The nihilists believe in nothing.
And they're, but certainly they're all egomaniacs, and you know that's why you put on a cowboy hat. It's why when you're a short, bald fuck like
he's
Bezos,
shorter than I thought.
Yeah, and you know you.
But
were they in Texas?
Yeah, they were in Texas.
Is that why he's wearing a stupid cowboy hat?
I would assume so.
I mean, even that facility out there couldn't run very long on its own. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's no water. There's no electricity. They run everything on generators. I mean, it's about the least green facility on the planet. The spaceport he built for Blue Origin, right? It's just ridiculous. And that thing in itself.
Why does it have to be blue? Like the dick pills are blue pills. I mean, what's up?
You know more about this. Oh my God. So,
what about Amazon? Is that not a benefit to society? I mean, I presume you're buying shit on Amazon.
I buy stuff on Amazon, but is it a benefit? I don't think so. I think in the long run, it's probably a net negative.
Why though?
Well, ask anybody that had their business, has had their family business put down by an Amazon, by the existence of Amazon, and all the people that have gone out of the smaller businesses and associated with it, all the people that Amazon has strong-armed out of the marketplace by buying them, crushing them with their monopolistic.
What about the people
practices
that have succeeded? That's the other argument to that is
Jeff Bezos.
No, I mean there's hundreds of thousands of retailers across the country that are competitors to Amazon. I read this one guy.
Until they're not. Until they decide to do whatever those people are doing themselves. Now that they force them to give up all their information and everything. And then Amazon decides, hey, guess what? We're not going to sell your pen and pencil sets on Amazon anymore. We're going to make exact duplicates and put your fucking ass out of business. And we're going to call it free enterprise and capitalism. There's nothing you can do about it because we own the platform. Yeah,
and those stories exist, but likewise other stories of success exist. I was reading a story about a guy who said he made $30,000 selling, I think, a self-published book on Amazon in the first year. And he said, my only other alternative if I didn't have Amazon was to sell it out of the trunk of my car. So I'm glad this platform exists, and I was able to. A guy like me selling nonsense in my book is able to make some money.
I'm happy for him too. Although I don't think it matters. I think the zillions of other businesses that Amazon has, I mean, it's the only game in town now. So I mean, it's a monopoly. So. We talked about that, so I'm not much in the anti-monopoly, antitrust kind of vein today.
Yeah, but the point is, think about the evolution. Let's keep you happy today, but think about the evolution of Amazon, which I think started as an online book retailer, and as far as I know, there are still actual bookstores in this country, and it's been 25 or 30 years. I personally, when I read a book, I like to have a physical book. I don't do the Kindle thing.
No.
Or book on tape.
I bought something recently, and they actually gave me a Kindle for free for buying
Amazon did?
Yeah, I'm not gonna say what it is that I purchased, but it was a large purchase, and no, the people I bought it from, it's like here's a Kindle, and here's all the details for this transaction that we just did, plus. It's a Kindle, and you can download books on it and everything.
Now, is that thing Wi-Fi, or do you have to
tablet,
connect
Wi-Fi.
it to your computer?
No, you can get I think you can get data plan for it too.
Is it like
you can run it on
it's all
Wi-Fi.
black and white, right? Or does it have a nice color screen?
No, they have.
The last Kindle I saw was probably the very first one was some woman by a pool somewhere on vacation.
I have a Kindle in a drawer. And one that Debbie
is it like
got
a
me
big
long time ago.
BlackBerry? Does it have physical keys and shit?
No, it's a small tablet. Right, and the one I had was black and white, no color, odd graphics on it and stuff. But then they came out with Kindle Fire or something. I don't know. Kindle on roids. Kindle Roid.
Do you ever? I
don't read books on Kindle.
Why can't you just use your iPad?
I don't like it on my iPad either.
Yeah, I don't either.
I went through a book reading, spree over the last year. Every single one, 5 science fiction books that I reread, approximately 5 political books that I bought from Amazon and read. Right, I'm not anti-Amazon. I'm anti-Jeff Bezos. I mean, I I don't have any problem with Amazon. I don't have any problem with online market, online selling and stuff like that. I think that's probably the way of the future. But I think the fact that, for all intents and purposes, there's no competition for Amazon is
Alibaba.
a problem. It's not in this country.
Sure it is.
And that guy, Jack Ma, and Alibaba, he just was disappeared. I think we talked about this. He was disappeared for like 2 weeks by the Chinese government. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not suggesting we take any leads from how the Chinese are handling big tech at all.
Did you see this other news story, speaking about the Chinese? I have brought up before, some of the challenges in this country with regard to private ownership of property. And I think that's, when we talk about solving problems, I think we really need to look at who is allowed to own property in this country. I cited
real estate, you mean?
Real estate, yeah, anything. And I think I cited it as an example some time ago in Canada, where they imposed some 25% tariff on foreigners buying property as a way to limit that, but also to make property more affordable for its citizens. And I think we need to look at something like that in the U.S. And I read another article over the weekend that apparently has some bipartisan support, go figure, over concern about the number of farmland, food-producing farm acres in this country that the Chinese are buying up. And that wasn't previously anything I had seen coming out of our dysfunctional government.
No, me either. I mean, I think we have every right to regulate that stuff. There's nothing about our free market or capitalism or anything that should inhibit the United States from, through regulation or legislation, foreign control of American assets.
Can we have that conversation? You and I can have that conversation,
Yeah.
but can the other adults in this country have that conversation without having it turn into a racist claim or an anti-immigration claim? Can it just be about,
I think
preservation of, these assets, if you want to call them that?
I think so. I'm not aware of any discussion of those particular issues that went that way that you're talking about. So, I mean, I think I could probably almost understand the fear that it might turn into that. But I think when you get down to it, I mean, I don't see anything about controlling foreign acquisition of American assets, especially when it is something like food producing land or something like that. I mean, I think that, if you're China or you're Italy or whatever, you're just not an equal player in the American economy, right? I mean, it's just the way it is. We're not typically in their economies, right? We rarely does our American business interests allowed to participate on equal footing with Chinese businesses in China.
And
Italian businesses in Italy.
What do you mean compete?
Well, I mean, if a big American business interest wanted to go to Italy and buy up whatever existing farmland there is that's producing food for Italians and is basically part of the Italian security situation, right? The ability for them to produce their own food. They would stop us in a heartbeat. It would never happen to begin with. There wouldn't happen. Then there'd be a bunch of debate about it. That's what's probably going on here. Chinese interests have probably bought a fair amount of U.S. farmland.
That's what I think.
We're just starting to figure it out and go,
this could be a problem.
Good idea, maybe not.
Right,
right.
And I think, isn't it mostly
then
true?
We just take it from them. It doesn't matter.
You think? Okay, let's get into that. But isn't it mostly true that, like you just said, as Americans, when we go to other countries, we don't have the same rights, that we afford non-citizens of this country.
Typically, yeah.
And let me repeat. I mean, I'm pro-immigration. I think we got.
You're pro-capitalism.
I am, but I mean,
right.
Does that mean
want the Chinese to come in and have a fair, have an equal ability to participate in capitalism and.
I do, but not at the expense of the U.S. citizens.
Okay, well, that's
America
good.
First, baby. Because think about it.
We're America.
If I'm sitting on hundreds of acres of farmland and I, want to sell it to the highest bidder, and Alibaba comes in and they're gonna give me $9 billion, and it's really only worth $4 billion. Those numbers sound familiar. But I don't think I should be allowed to sell it to a foreign entity. And I think the reason for
I'm
that...
not 100% sure that you are, right?
I think I am.
Let's say
you don't have to be a citizen in this country to buy shit.
Let's say that you actually know something about computers or electronics, and you have to go
on top of Control Alt Delete.
Yes. Besides that, past that you have somehow built a medium to large company that produces, advanced silicon chips or something. And they have both, domestic industrial applications and military applications and blah, blah, blah. And you say, well, that's it. I did what I wanted to do. Time for me to sell this, reap the profit, which is my capitalistic right. Mm-hmm. And who's got that? Beijing. Ding dong, sold. And then the government says, yeah, no, you can't do that. That's already
in place.
That's already in place.
And what's the connection there? Is it because it's probably something under national security? But what
national security, electronics, and stuff like that.
So is there like entire sectors of businesses that would fall under that?
Yeah, computers, communication, phones, all kinds of stuff, right?
So, for example, Dell Computers, Michael Dell, hasn't he sold a couple times? Maybe sold his business, then bought it back.
I know nothing about Dell. Sorry.
But theoretically, if a Dell computer company wanted to sell, could it be owned by a foreign entity?
I'm not sure that the government's going to. If Dell is an American company, I'm not sure they're going to let Dell sell to Huawei or Tencent or ByteDance. Those are all Chinese tech companies.
Yeah, especially Huawei now.
Yeah, Huawei. And there's Huawei US, right? About half the podcasts that I listen to, besides us. Funny, not to change the subject, but there was some conversation. Was it Friday night with our good listener friend of the program, Doug, and there was
who has been a guest
that we didn't introduce. We kind of find out.
Yeah, and no introduction necessary.
Yeah, no, not for us because we know him, but for you guys, maybe.
Well, now they know him.
Now they know.
You get 2 hours.
That's the guy that
was the whole point. Doug, we're going to have you on for 2 hours so that everyone can get to know you.
We're not going to tell anybody how we know you or why we know you or anything else. But when that text conversation on Friday, I think didn't he ask if we find it weird listening to ourselves? And I listen to our podcast at least. I try to listen to it twice before I do the next one, and sometimes I don't make it, but always for sure once. But the question wasn't, do you listen to it? The question was, do you find it weird listening to yourselves? And of course, my response is what it's always been to that question. And my love of speaking in public in general, I am in love with the sound of my own voice. So it's irrelevant to me how many times I listen to it. I love hearing it, which I find odd, right? I mean, I've actually even tried to sing and do stuff on musical recordings, and that never bothers me either. And, sometimes if I hit the wrong note, which happens often, I'm not much of a singer, but even then I can still just kind of somehow.
When you were in your rock and roll days, did you ever do backup vocals?
I did lead vocals.
I thought you were the drummer.
I could sing and drum.
So you were the lead singer while you were drumming?
Well, when I played in bands, so this is really not going to, most of you are not going to care about this at all, but for Travis's benefit, when I had a couple of bands where I played the drums in the band, and in both of those bands, I had headphone mics, that much like we use in podcasting and stuff, but
the ones that like Garth Brooks made famous.
I don't know.
Back in the day,
I never watched Garth Brooks,
Michael Jackson dancing around, and
something like that. Yeah. So I didn't have to use my hand to hold the mic; it was right there in front of me, and I could sing mostly backup with those. But then I made a lot of recordings in my home studio. Where I wasn't playing the drum. Sometimes I played the drums on the tracks, but and then I could do vocals over it. So, this podcasting is not the first time I've spoken into a microphone or heard my voice in playback. It's the first time I've heard my voice in playback speaking, except for when I was a small child and I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, a little
right,
one, right? Yeah. And that always seemed funny. Oh, my voice sounds weird, but I'm used to it now. And the reproduction of when you record yourself now, you sound exactly like you sound, right?
When you go back and listen, do you find yourself agreeing with me more, or do you find yourself still agreeing with yourself?
I'm pretty convincing. No, the truth of that is I do listen, and it is helpful to me to hear you state your points, your side of different issues, for me to hear it again, because sometimes I don't want to call it the heat of conversation, but in the middle of a conversation, it's hard. Try not to do this, but you have to spend some time formulating what your next thing you're going to say is. So I think you do that at the expense sometimes of being able to listen as intently to the person, to what the person you're talking to is saying. So
well, you do get heated.
Balance.
I mean, you literally turn red, and you're like the old cartoon where you got to like count backwards from 10, and then you can see the redness leaving your face, and you turn back to normal.
That's a lifetime of frustration with the bullshit of the everyday life. But go ahead.
We'll get back on this farming thing. So,
okay.
I guess what you're saying
farming, an issue I know absolutely nothing about, but go ahead.
But I wouldn't necessarily draw the line at just agriculture or food producing land. I think all real estate, whether it's apartment buildings in Manhattan or single family homes in Los Angeles, I think that should be reserved for legal citizens of this country. And I think that would do a lot for the affordability of those units.
It would. I mean, I can remember when my wife and I were going to Hawaii in the early days, where we liked to vacation most of the time. And there was a period of time, 90s maybe, where there was an awful lot of Chinese speculative real estate buying, and it was driving prices up for Hawaiian real estate. And, we were never really looking to live there or buy property there. That's where we want to go to vacation, and owning property didn't have to be a part of that. And, we were never in a position during those times to think about, buying a second, actual residence and trying to, keep up with the mortgage. Well, at the time I had two houses on the mainland that I was trying to keep up with. But, we're looking at it going, wow, this is bad, and then we have relatives. I mean, my wife has relatives that, born, raised, grow up, going to live their whole life on that island. And that makes it hard for them.
Are they spread out across multiple islands?
Mostly all on Hawaii or Oahu.
Oahu.
Yeah. I mean, there's not the work opportunities on the other islands that there is on Oahu. And they don't all live there, right? One of the cousins that my wife is there visiting right now has been living in Seattle for quite a long time. So, but the bulk of the main extended family, the cousins and my mother-in-law's brother and sister, his families, live there, and their kids have all grown up and appear to be continuing to live there. And, for them to buy a house, I mean, it's pretty tough. And again, certainly the Chinese real estate speculation of the 80s and 90s screwed up the pricing there, right?
I think that's still going on.
I think so. But, I mean, should they be excluded? I mean, let's put it this way. If you're a real estate agent in Hawaii, you don't think so.
Yeah,
if you sold property in Hawaii, you don't think so. If you're a Hawaiian resident that's buying, that has a home and is counting on the price of that home to go up, you don't give a shit why the equity's going up. You just want it to go up. I mean,
we remember several months ago we talked about industries that were ripe for disruption. I think we talked about real estate, which the real estate community and the commissions that are made really haven't changed the percentage. It's just that the valuations are so inflated that there's a significant amount of money to be made. And maybe that sounds anti-capitalist of me, but it's my belief that you still would have buyers. You still would be able to move that property. It would be at a lower rate. At a go back to whatever period you want to start at, but it would be more of a controlled rate of growth, more controlled inflation than what we're seeing now. These, especially in a place like Hawaii or California. I mean, you and I have benefited from that, but that's one of the things where I think, if we're being honest, it is kind of out of control. I mean, if I could wave my magic wand, I would say, go all the way back and put a layer on banning foreign investment And then what would that look like with my own personal gains? It would be significantly less,
Right.
but I think we'd all be better for it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I bought my house that I currently live in '97, and you know, was excited when I saw a similar, you know, house, similar floor plan, 2 blocks away, sell for $300,000 more than I paid for my house. I'm like, yeah, you know, but then there came a couple-year period where, you know, the value went up in all of Orange County like 100%.
I know.
It was just nuts. And so I surely wouldn't want to see it be any other way. I mean, I don't think it has anything to do with foreign investment in my neighborhood particularly, but the overall real estate market is buoyed from one end to the other by what happened. I mean, if there's something going on in a specific area, so if Chinese investment or Amazon investment is jacking the price up in some area, it's going to affect all real estate. So it's a little hard to say. But
exactly.
I think in general, I would have to be on board with. I mean, there's no part. This is probably wrong. There's no part of me that's here looking out for Chinese. For the Chinese,
the well-being of the Chinese.
That's not part of my care package, right? I just don't care. I mean, go do your capitalistic real estate stuff in China. You got plenty of people and plenty of land. Go build some houses there, and if we feel that it's having a negative effect on our overall, you know, economic situation, then we can do whatever we want to do. And
but what are we going to do about it? I mean, because there is a negative overall effect on our economy because we don't make anything. It's all made in China, and we saw that firsthand. That's all through COVID.
That's why sometimes foreign investment in America, anything, is welcome, right? Because, hey, how are things going to become more valuable if there isn't some foreign investment, right? I mean, everything from China is not outlawed. I mean, we import every goddamn thing we have from China, so it would be a little disingenuous.
Yeah, almost nothing is outlawed.
Yeah,
are we not worried about the Chinese expansion globally? Are we not worried about them taking over places like Africa?
Well, are we worried about it?
Yeah.
Are you somehow not resigned to it or something?
Well, what are you saying? Because it's a foregone conclusion that we should all just take the pill and be okay with it?
Let's see. I think that there's some stuff going on there that's going to be hard to do anything about, right?
Like?
Well, there's a lot of landmass there, so they, unlike a lot of places that would like to compete with the U.S. on a global scale, but they have nothing in their actual geographical location but rocks and dirt and salt or something, right?
I think isn't that oil one of your favorite cocktails?
Yeah,
rocks and dirt and salt. You do a lot with that.
Well, if there's enough salt, it's fine.
Right.
But yet, you know, I don't know that China has the breadbasket that the United States does, but we're on the verge of destroying the breadbasket by, you know, letting our climate change so significantly that the breadbasket, which we've already seen happen before,
are we not supposed to be eating as much bread?
The Dust Bowl any time, right? I mean, none of us were alive to remember, you know, what it was like when there was widespread drought across the Midwest, and you know, most of the farmland turned into Dust Bowls. I mean, that's just not a term, right? So I think probably many of us probably are unaware of that, and probably certainly most younger people. If I'm wrong about that, forgive me, but my guess is that 9 out of 10 people under the age of 25 or even 30, if I said, hey, what can you tell me about the Dust Bowl? They wouldn't know what the fuck I was talking about. And
might be a football game somewhere.
Yeah, the Dust Bowl. Is that before or after New Year's? And I don't really blame them for that, but the fact is that, you know, like you were really fond of saying often, right, nothing's guaranteed. So America competing with China, I mean, they have the sheer numbers, right? So we still have, I mean, we still have superiority in a number of things, but I think for almost all of it, it's just a matter of time.
Time as far as what? Before we don't have superiority?
Right. I mean, right now, believe it or not, our military is still 10-1, but that won't be that
10 to
way
1.
for,
What we're 10 times better than their military.
Yeah, stronger and advanced and so forth, right? But
I thought you're anti-war machine.
No, not necessarily.
I'm not saying you're a warmonger, but I mean, are you? That is a good position for us to be in, to have a stronger military than the Chinese, you're saying?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think really, not a fan of Vietnam or the Afghanistan war or anything like that, or any of those type of uses where it's all strictly motivated by oil or the acquisition of oil. Or, Trump's idea was to go into Afghanistan and take the oil, right?
I think he pretty much said that.
He could never
build the wall on the southern border.
Yeah.
We're going to take the Afghani oil.
Well, he could never figure out how we won Desert Storm and then kicked Saddam's ass and never got any oil out of the project, right? Because that would be illegal. But that means
kind of a valid question, though. No.
No.
It's like you get in a fight with a guy and you take his wallet.
Well, look, the big oil companies already had their oil interests in Vietnam, Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Laos, and all those places. So they didn't start that war to go in and take it. They started that war to make sure they could continue to control it, that the indigenous peoples in those countries didn't take control of their own natural resources, the vast oil.
Yeah, the Saudis are now saying, hey, we're going to drill and dig until we get the very last drop
of oil out of Saudi Arabia?
Out of the earth. We're going to suck it dry.
Oh, well, more fun with dinosaurs. I don't know what to
How
tell
much?
you.
Do you know how much oil we have left?
I don't. That's a lot, though, still.
It kind of is. It depends on who you ask. I was asking you, your doctor community, if anybody.
Yeah.
What do you guys talk about over coffee
I'm not,
at the quarterly climatologist meeting?
Our strategic reserve is pretty big. So, and I think that the good thing about green technology and all of that is that without having to suck any more oil out of the earth, our reserves become larger and longer lasting just sitting there without having to add anything to them. Because as you develop green technologies that can do things that took fossil fuels, then because not everything's going to convert well to green technology. So assuming there's going to be some use of fossil fuels for a long time, the strategic reserve of fossil fuels that, say, the United States has becomes bigger just on its own, right? Just because, okay, well, now what we would have to use 100% of that for, now we can accomplish by only using 25% plus our renewable energy.
And not only that, it'll be accelerated by the fact that the other nations around the world are going to be drawing down reserves at a much quicker pace. Like China, I think they still have, God, what did I read? Like 3 coal power plants still being developed like right now. They're not taking their foot off the gas.
On coal?
Yeah.
Well, clean coal.
The clean coal they're stealing from South Africa.
Coal is just like the worst energy source ever. But it's just going to be a matter of when there are alternative supplies, alternative for fossil fuel, alternative energy supplies coming from other
alternative
sources.
Facts, alternative fossil fuels.
No alternative facts.
Oh.
Who was I talking to about that? Yeah. So I think that, I really think that public opinion is shifting on climate change all the way around. The question will be, is it going to be soon enough? And how much damage is going to be done before, if, and when we ever actually do anything? And right now it's just all talk, Travis.
I don't know about that.
Nobody's doing anything.
Well, I think the reason why I agree with you that things are starting to change, and in this country anyway, and I attribute that to the fact that the audience is getting younger, meaning the people who are the holdouts, people who don't want to see change.
Easy for you and me. Well, easy for me. Maybe not you. Easy for me at my age with no children, although there are – kids that I care about and I want to see grow up and stuff. Easy for me at my age with no children, although there are, kids that I care about and I want to see grow up and stuff. even some of them are Republican kids. So
you look at, you had to take, you swallowed hard and you said, even some are Republican kids.
That wasn't my attempt at comedy. I've noticed that my comedy quotient has been a little lacking.
There's been a little lacking, but you're good today. You're on par.
I want to laugh more. Huh?
We had a guest on some time ago, and I made a point about you. I think I was saying, one of the things that keeps you young or something to that effect was the fact that you laugh a lot. That there's some positive things, that happen when you laugh, and
I think
it's good for people.
I think there's been a cumulative effect of the political scene that has taken a toll on my sense of humor, and I think it's probably visible in the podcast. I can't imagine that it's not. I mean, my main goal for being here is not to crack jokes, although I'm always,
that's my goal.
I always like to crack jokes. Yeah. For me, this is an awesome place for me to spout my opinions about things without, too much retribution. And for friends and family that I talk to outside of the show, just know, I will love you and care about you whether you agree with me or not. It's not that important to me, so I have noticed that, there's a fair amount of caution from family and friends to get into any kind of deep political
to approach you about it.
Well, I mean, look.
Why? Because they think they're going to set you off?
Maybe, or, I think that, I would like to think that everybody that I know outside of this show agrees, sees things from my point of view, but it's simply not the case. And that's okay. The reality of it is, I would not expect that. So, and I think that outside of this show, certainly for me, the guiding light here is that, hey, you can have a different opinion than somebody else. You can make me aware of somebody else's different opinion for the sake of conversation, and I feel the same. And, I might get fired up, but I'm not trying to shout you down so that you stop bringing those things. And just in general, I think, I think the best, most positive thing about this experience, this show, is that we're hopefully stirring some discussion, right, among people and people don't see things the same, right? And even in small groups.
Well, not only that, people just aren't talking. That's what we really saw through, the demise of Trump, maybe even the rise of Trump in the whole 4 years and the period of time since he's been out. But it's yes that people don't agree, and that's fine, but they're not even voicing their opinions to one another. They're not even, in a respectful manner communicating their disagreement or even having meaningful conversations.
Yeah, we're seeing that.
Fuck you. Well, fuck you.
And we're seeing that in the breakdown of the political system, right? Can you and I fix that, Travis? I don't think that we directly can, but I think we can contribute to things moving in a different direction, in a better direction, by inspiring conversation and having the discussion between us that maybe some people are finding it hard to have. And because you asked a little earlier in this show, do I find myself when I listen to the podcast? Because apparently I listen to it more than you do after the fact. But, folks, in Travis's defense, he's actually a lot busier than I am these days. So
I'm just busy editing out all the pee breaks.
And doing a fine job, too, because you guys and I will never know where those pee breaks are happening in these recordings. And that takes some skill. So, because none of this, as I look around the table here and there's some massive wires and technology here, I know that, 10 months ago, you didn't know anything about any of this stuff, right? So, this is a massive little hub of technology we got going here, topped off by the spider web of awesome microphones. Someday we'll have 4 people in.
Well, we are going to have Matt come in. Maybe we had to reschedule him, but he's going to be here in the next couple of weeks.
Let's get Matt in. He's probably the youngest of our friends, and he's a pretty funny guy, and is very representative of a different outlook. A good outlook, in my opinion. So
I want to dig deep with him on the conversation we started. I don't want to get into it now, but just last week about, Hawaii and, just you have family there. We got into a conversation. He's born there, and and
who his friends were when he was growing up, stuff like that.
yeah, and his experience and his family's experience with the
Yeah.
war and all those things that we were getting into.
Yeah, that was a little that's a little more weighty subject than I'm used to talking about with Matt. I mean, usually we're just bullshitting about something and making fun of somebody somewhere.
Well, he I think felt comfortable going there and
Yeah.
opening up about it because of who he was talking to,
Right.
which is the whole point of what you just said about this show. We're having uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah, I mean, and he's so even though he's young, I think he'll have really interesting outlooks on many. I mean, he already does. We already know what he listens to. He's going to want to talk about some trading stuff, some
That's
day trader stuff too.
That's
So,
going to be very interesting.
yeah. So that'll be good. So
What do we got here? Is the market up here? It looks like we're back.
I don't know. It's all red again.
Yeah, well, some of it's red.
Well,
it's not as red as it was. China's internet crackdown. What is this?
Specifically of these after-school tutoring or training companies.
Oh yeah, I heard something about that.
Well, that's a big.
They're cracking down in China.
On tech.
Well, it's for-profit education programs, I guess. It's not state-run. So
Well, that would be bad for them because then they're not in control, right? And there's been a massive crackdown there over the last month on tech and all things information wise. I mean, that's it's communist China, right? I mean, it's I don't know if it's everything. I think it is every stereotype we have of that. And I think that they had kind of loosened up in an attempt to let that sector of their economy flourish, right? The companies we mentioned earlier, ByteDance, Tencent, TikTok, Huawei, these are all information-related situations one way or the other. Jack Ma and Alibaba, which is the Jeff Bezos, Amazon Chinese equivalent. And these companies grow, and that's been good for China. But I think China has looked at the United States, at the unbridled growth of Facebook and Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and several other situations, and they're like, oh, no, that is not working for them. Those companies are now out of control and are turning out to be net negatives for the American society.
Well, maybe they listen to your talking points. Maybe they listen to you.
Maybe. I mean, maybe my voice is echoing through the halls of the Chinese Knesset or whatever. But
I know there's another guy, there's a Texas gubernatorial candidate that I know listens to the podcast because I read some statements about him where he's saying if he's elected governor in Texas, he will abolish the property tax initiative, which is what I've been saying here in California.
You think he listens to the podcast?
Well, where else did you get that idea? I've never heard anybody else say it.
Oh my God, yeah. That one came out of the ether for us there. Nobody else has ever said anything about abolishing.
Hey, I just said I'm trying to help you, my friend, and keep you in your house. How about these Olympics? You watching the Olympics?
No. The whole
did you run out of care? Or are you never an Olympic guy?
not really much of an Olympic guy to begin with. And then watching any kind of sporting event now back to having no audience or piped in crowd sounds or whatever the fuck's going on, multicolored seats, so it looks like
that is so weird
in the stands when there's not. So I haven't watched any of it. I think
viewership's way down.
I think it's stupid that they're having them. I mean, they should have just canceled it outright. That it is just there's no really real good reason to have the Olympics in Japan, where the pandemic is virtually out of control. They have less than a 12% vaccination rate nationwide. The people in the country can't go see it. I get the sole thing that they say that makes this all right is that, Japan put a lot of money into these venues and they'll continue to use them for years afterwards. Okay, fine. If that's the case, great. But as far as me watching it, not trying to put a pox on their house or anything, but yeah, I'm not watching it because it's just, to me, it's just kind of depressing, right? It's like, okay, you guys should have gotten a handle on this. Just in the year since.
But would you have watched it if? See,
I'm not an Olympics guy. I'm not a sports guy. Period.
Yeah, but don't you think there's some? I know people who are not sports people who rally behind things like the Olympics or the World Cup for soccer because it's just
It's drama.
once in an every it's drama. And once in an every 4-year thing, it's positive drama, which is a change from most of the other bullshit we always see.
What little Olympics I would watch for the same reason that I watch supposed street racers gather out in some legal place and pretend they're street racing, and watch mostly bullshit and double talk, and so I can see the cars run, 3 times in a half-hour segment, right? Where I really like to see them run 30 times in a half-hour segment, and they could if they just ran the races. So for me, if I happen to turn on the Olympics and there's some actual competition going on, great, that's all fantastic. But most of the time, it's one talking head, or it's who's the gal from the Today Show,
Savannah
Guthrie, and the Goon Squad from Good Morning America.
Aren't they all like sequestered in some hotel? They're not allowed to leave. The whole thing is bogus to me. I'm with you. It's depressing to watch it without people, but for different reasons. I mean, you know me. I don't think we ever should have done anything for fucking COVID. You say, hey, people, if you don't want to die, don't leave your house. Fill the stadiums, fill the concert halls, go compete, fuck off.
Well, cancel A Green New World.
What is this now?
I don't know.
Firms are initiating coverage on Krispy Kreme today. There's not a single cell in the bunch.
Krispy Kreme. What's so the reason I brought up the Olympics though?
I'm bullish on Krispy Kreme, by the way.
Where is there a Krispy Kreme by you?
That's a funny story. There's over on a relatively close, large business street close to my house. There was a bunch of fast food stuff went in a few years ago. There was an existing Taco Bell, and then Del Taco was the only one there, and then they built an In-N-Out Burger, which was good, right? Mm-hmm. But then next to the In-N-Out Burger, they built a Krispy Kreme, and so it's like, okay, this whole little section of the street,
very unhealthy corner to be on.
It's not good, right? And so then came, and we talked about this the other day. Then came the low carbohydrate diet fad, all the Atkinson and all that stuff of a few years ago. Krispy Kreme had expanded across the country. They had went from a regional donut legend to a national chain, lots of franchises, and everybody had Krispy Kreme fucking madness. Then the whole low carbohydrate diet thing, and they closed about 80% of their stores, right? And so the place that was Krispy Kreme turned into a Chick-fil-A.
Even better.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I've eaten there, if someone puts one in front of my face, but I've never said like, hey, let's go to Chick-fil-A tonight. So I think I've eaten there twice or something. It's okay. I like the little chicken sandwich with the sauce and the pickle, and that's it. I mean, after that, it's no big deal. I'm not going.
Well, it's a chicken place. What else are you going to get? You're going to get chicken tenders. You're going to get a chicken sandwich.
That's about all they have, right?
Pretty much.
And then they have waffle fries, which I don't like. I don't really care for waffle fries. So there's a bunch of chicken places around. There's some place called Hottie's, which is some kind of hot chicken, which I have not tried because I'm not a huge fan of spice. So, super spicy chicken doesn't really do it for me. There's a Korean chicken place close by called Holdak, Holdak, and there's 2 of those in Orange County. But apparently there is a whole bunch of Korean chicken fast food kind of places sprouting up, and there's another much bigger chain that's showing up in the shopping centers and stuff. So it's Koreans like fried chicken, and sometimes they'll
who doesn't like fried chicken,
right? And we're all aren't we all? Every once in a while you get a craving for Kentucky Fried Chicken, but then you're like, do I really know what piece of chicken this is? They all kind of look the same, right? And so
because the mound of breading on the outside.
And then there's so those places are kind of interesting. There's Cane's Chicken Fingers, right? Which I don't know.
That's better than Chick-fil-A.
I don't get it. So, I don't get it. I don't get the giant lines that I see around that place. My personal opinion is that what we're seeing there is the success of a fast food restaurant built on the fact that millions of children were raised on chicken fingers and French fries because their parents were gutless and got them hooked on that at an early age, and then didn't have the chonies to make them eat some kind of decent food. And so now that they're adults or 18-year-olds or whatever, they get an urge at 9:30 to have chicken fingers and French fries. They pile into this Raising Cane's place because I've gone in there and every single person in there is got cargo shorts and their hat backwards. And
well, the other thing is that shit's
sleeveless
inexpensive though. So it's when you're talking about affordability and can you find a meal, and that shit's inexpensive. But hey, I want to try to get you back on this Olympic conversation.
Okay.
Do you have an opinion on? There was really two big narratives I think going into the Olympics. One was there was one or maybe a couple athletes that got popped for not passing the drug test, but then the other big narrative was
you're out.
Yeah, you're out. But then then transgender athletes competing. Do you have an opinion on that?
Don't we have a transgender Olympics?
You mean just transgender?
Yeah.
Not that I know
We
of.
have a paranormal Olympics, right? No, paralegal?
We have a paralegal Olympics, paranormal. We have the dick rockets in space are going up and collecting aliens to have paranormal Olympics when they return to Earth.
Here's the thing. You're an Olympic athlete. You test positive for smoking dope. What can I tell you? I think for everybody that's, having a conniption over it, just get over it. I mean, there's just some things you get into that there are rules and you get into it. And the idea is that you participate according to the rules. Do I think that marijuana or any of the anabids that come out of there are performance enhancing? I don't know. Are there sports where you do better if you have some THC running around in your system? I don't know. Maybe archery or do they shoot guns in the Olympics?
They do, yeah.
So, I mean, who knows, right? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it would help you, in track and field.
Is there anything you can recall in your life that you did better high?
No. No, I do remember thinking things were better, but they were never better, right? And it was funny because I did play a lot of music during those years, and I, was in bands and stuff, and that was always ended up being a pet peeve for me. As you can tell, I've been a grumpy old man my whole life, but here's the thing: we all like to party when we practice, but then a practice turns, and then everybody gets high or drinks too much beer or both, and then the practice sucks, and it's like.
But isn't the point to practice? Like, let's say you're going to get loaded on stage. Don't you need to have practiced that first?
Loaded on stage.
Oh, you don't? I thought you guys played for beer.
I've done that too. And, that was never a good idea. And, I've tried to play, hammered too, and that doesn't work either. So, fortunately, when I had a couple of bands and we did play some bars and stuff like that, for me personally, I was straight. Because, I didn't want to be all wasted trying to do that in front of people.
Well, you're trying to hit the high note as well as try to nail a paradiddle. So it's like you got to concentrate.
Oh, here's the bad news, right? Never learned how to do a paradiddle. But, and then, we would get together. These were work nights that, would practice and take time and then go over there. And instead of moving forward, with the band as a whole and especially if we had an upcoming performance or something, right, then I really just wanted to practice. If there was nothing, if we didn't have anything scheduled and there was nothing to practice for, whatever, just get together, get loaded and, play around with some music. But it was never better. And then there was plenty of times where I'm like, look, this is fucked. I came to practice. If you guys don't want to practice, then let's just party. But, let's not kid ourselves. We're not getting any better. But, bands are short-lived, and there's a lot of reasons for that because everybody has their own agenda. The lead singer, guitar player in the 5-piece band I was in, he was only in it for one reason. He was a good guitar player and a good singer, but then he would just slop through a lead, okay, this is the guitar solo part, right? He just slopped through it and not even try to play it good, whether it was practice or performance, right? Because all he was really interested in was chatting up whatever chicks were in the bar at the end of the show.
You just have to fake the solo. You don't have to be good at it.
Right, exactly. Right. So, and I just really, that did not fly well with me. So, I was never big fan of people coming to practices and just, why don't you just call it in over the phone? Why don't you just get on the phone? When your time comes, you can play it over the phone.
What was this news? Speaking of music, Eric Clapton was in the news this weekend saying something like I don't even know if I have this right. He was taking a position on COVID vaccines, and I think he was saying, I have a 50% chance of getting this right.
Okay, go for it.
I think he was saying that he does not want to play in a venue if vaccines are required.
Oh, I don't know.
But I mean, I have an equal chance
Sounds
of getting
like-
that wrong. Could be the other way around.
Could be the other way around.
I don't know.
I don't know any details on that. I didn't hear it. I'm not sure that. Well, I didn't watch anything like that over the weekend, right? I don't think. I just don't. Anything that has to do with politics or taking a stand on the vaccines is just. I don't like it.
Are you inspired, or maybe that's not the right word? Are you encouraged by more and more Republican voices coming out in favor of getting the vaccine?
If that's happening, sure. Yeah.
It is. I think even the constantly negative news is posting stories about that.
Yeah.
And I think that in the last literally 24 to 48 hours, vaccine uptick is on the rise.
Well, that's good.
In this country, anyway.
That's good. I heard just a very little bit about that, and I would say that the most likely reason for Republican probably governors or mayors or whatever is probably who's coming out, and maybe there's been some congressional change on that, is that they are seeing the negative effects of a low vaccination rate on the economies in their states, because it will lead to people being afraid to go out, more masking, less business, and then shutdowns. And then they don't want to be the legislature whose hospitals in their district are, completely flooded with COVID-19 Delta variant patients, right? And then the numbers go up. And so I think that it's tragic, really, that it takes all those reasons. But whatever reasons it takes, it's good. I mean, it's bad for us, Travis, even for us that are vaccinated, right? The people that don't get vaccinated. We talked about this maybe a little last week or something, and I've had more conversation and watched some and seen some more things on TV I found more interesting. It's not all just, you said something about toothless Trump people that don't get the vaccines. It's not just those. There's definitely are those people, and he's definitely had that effect, even though he's had the vaccine
and encourages it,
and theoretically. But the culmination of all the misinformation that he put out along the road has resulted. But there's a lot of people that are not apparently being overly influenced by Trump or Republicans.
Yeah, it turns out they're just dumb on their own.
Well, they are, but I did also hear some of them just come out and say, "Hey, I don't trust the government," and that is actually part of the negative effects from that administration. I mean, that was their main.
But the government
thing.
didn't make this vaccine.
That that doesn't change that. That's the reason they gave for it. So they see the vaccine as being promoted by the government, and so they don't trust the government because of what they've been told by people that have been tearing down the government for the last 6 years.
That makes perfect sense, and that's an argument that I might make.
Yeah.
Except for the fact that the government didn't make this vaccine.
No, but it's the government that is promoting vaccination. It's the Biden administration. It's Harris. It's governors. It's PSAs. I mean, it's the government, and they didn't say because I don't trust vaccines the government makes. They just said, hey, I don't trust the government, so I'm not getting vaccinated, and you can't make me. And then of course people idiotically conflate freedom with selfishness, right? And here's the problem, right? So you don't get vaccinated, and I get COVID-19 even though I've been vaccinated. And I don't really get symptoms. It maybe even stays asymptomatic. I for sure don't go in the hospital. I don't get very sick.
You don't die is probably
right. But I carry
biggest
around.
Thing.
But I carry around a viral load, and when I breathe out, I'm spewing out.
Is that what
I'm infected.
Bezos is? Is he a viral load?
He's got a load, all right. And so then people that are not protecting themselves, and we're back into, non-masking and inside and just in general. And I don't want to mask. I'm sick of it. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I'm not
anymore.
doing it. I will not do that.
So here's the thing. It makes the people that are not getting vaccinated even more responsible for it, right? Because they're not getting vaccinated. It's causing it to continue to spread throughout the country, even into areas with higher vaccination rates.
Was it you who equated it to your homeowner's insurance or vehicle insurance, that you're paying a higher premium because those uninsured motorists are fucking it up for everybody?
I didn't do that, but sounds like a viable, analogy to me. I think I'm sick of the selfish attitudes being couched in freedom. I'm sick of that.
But
right?
I get the frustration, but they're technically right in the sense that they don't have to. But I think what we're seeing now is a line that's being drawn into how much we're going to let those people participate in society.
Someone told me over the weekend, well, employers can't make you get it. And I'm like, yeah, they can.
They can.
Yeah.
Employers can make you get it.
I
Colleges can make their students get it.
Yeah.
We're seeing reports today that I think it was New York and LA are requiring everybody who falls under the tier of a public employee to get, so that would be teachers, fire, police, required to get it. There was what was the report from New York? Like less than 50% of NYPD officers had got the vaccine.
I mean, go figure. I personally don't think we understand very well the amount of vaccine resistance that there is. I personally think, with no proof to back this up, that the nonstop onslaught of negative COVID information that came out of this last administration in the Republican Party and the Senate and the Republican Congress has just had a terrible, terrible effect of making what was an anti-vaxxing kind of group in this country explode. Right.
So what's your take on that? That there was so much misinformation about COVID to begin with that it wasn't that deadly. So therefore, now that there's a vaccine, we don't need that because it's not that deadly. Or what's the connection between the misinformation?
I'm going to leave out the caveat that you put in there. I don't know, if that was on purpose or just part of the setup of the question. But I mean, I just would make a general statement that misinformation, wrong information, especially concerning any kind of negative effects from vaccines or any kind of conspiratorial
microchips in the
all of
needles.
It, from the most stupid thing to the most reasonable concern, all of that has been greatly worsened by the misinformation being spread on purpose for political reasons by the Republican Party, by the Trump administration, and by social media outlets, by allowing vast amounts of misinformation to go out on their platforms when they were perfectly capable of stopping all of it.
So what specifically is the misinformation about the vaccines? Is it
Trav, just take any piece of misinformation that has come out about vaccines that has come out from.
Well, what is it? I'm asking. I haven't seen it.
That we don't know that something's bad is going to happen, that they're putting stuff in it we don't know. It's some way for the government to control us, that it's not safe simply because it's on emergency authorization. I mean, there's just so much, right? And then for some reason, people of color disproportionately do not want to take it because they simply don't believe the white scientific community. And
what do you make of that?
I think that some of that, unfortunately, and this is going to be hard for you because I don't think you identify with this, but I mean, there are well-documented cases of the United States government, running experiments specifically with viruses on vast segments of minority populations and mostly black people.
Like in prisons and stuff?
Yeah, in prisons and in medical testing and trials and,
But weren't a lot of the scientists who developed these vaccines, weren't they all minorities?
You mean the ones we have now?
Yeah, the newest vaccine.
No, I don't know about that. I mean, I don't know anything about the people that developed it.
I thought it was like a black woman who she was like the lead scientist on one of the vaccines.
I don't know, but I don't think any of that matters to the people that have those feelings that have been affected by the past atrocities that were committed by the United States government, specifically United States medical establishment, using minorities, people, marginalized populations that don't have any power to test horrific drug therapies on them. And just, I think that unfortunately we would think that in this time and place, especially with most of that being known and out in the open, people would not fear that was going on. But, we're not in the black churches. We're not in the barbershops. We're not in the restaurants and the church groups and the youth groups and the things in these communities. We don't know what they're saying to each other. I don't think we have any.
But is that data that you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's that, and that's in these, probably mostly in the black community. But then you have tons of misinformation that has gone out into the information, world, and specifically Facebook. Facebook, Twitter, these places, and other places. You talked in a previous episode about how you think maybe social media groups are going to condense and be smaller groups and things like this. And yeah, that's probably true. But in a lot of those, and we'll call them, a lot of them are what we'd have to think of or used to think of as fringe groups, have purposely put out misinformation so that some people won't vaccinate, and this problem will continue to be a problem because it's the conflict and the deaths and the things that they thrive on that draw these groups together.
So how do you overcome the messaging? So really, just take the two main points in that there's misinformation being spread about the vaccine or the benefits or whatever, and then you have a totally different angle that I have never seen or read about, that minority groups don't want to take it because they're afraid, this could be some, deal from the past where they're trying to do experimental testing on minority groups. So how do you, that's what they believe, right or wrong. These massive groups of people believe these things. So how do you counter the messaging? And what platform do you do it? So is the answer you have the correct information on the same platforms that are guilty of the misinformation, or how do you get it out?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I don't think there's a panacea for that. And as far as however much of the vaccine hesitancy is due to those stories of past, abuses of marginalized peoples by government medical authorities, you don't fix that, right? You just have to get far enough away from it. I mean, we just need to get through this pandemic without anything like that ever coming to light, right?
Well,
guess what? We didn't use the pandemic as an excuse to not treat 300,000 black people with syphilis that we gave them on purpose to see what would happen. We're not going to do that, right? And guess what? In this pandemic, there were no drugs administered in the guise of vaccines that gave people syphilis, so that the medical establishment could follow them and see exactly what happens to them.
Over what period of time?
Well, what?
What I'm saying is, what period of time would you? What's the?
Okay, so let me. I'm trying to make a point.
Yeah.
So that's the type of thing that happened in the past, and so you ask how long or how do we deal with that? Hey, you don't deal with it. You can't come out. There's nobody, even, not Jesse Jackson or the Reverend Al or anybody else who can come out and say, hey, I can assure you that there's no funny business going on with these vaccines like there was in these 6 or 7.
But don't you think you have to have a rebuttal to it if people are citing that as a reason why they don't want it?
I think you have to have this pandemic and get through it and go on and have history reflect that this was not used by the powers that be to engage in another horrific medical experiment on minorities.
But how do you get through it if people don't take the vaccine?
No, I just got to get to the other side. I'm talking 10 or 15 years from now. Right? I mean, somebody has to be able to look back on this pandemic and say, well, look, that's not really a thing. Guys, we can come out and say it now. Like I said, you can take the most respected mouthpieces for the black community you can come up with, and then coming out and telling them that it's not a thing won't do any good.
So
they're just going to think that Reverend Al doesn't know because he's co-opted by those forces.
So here's you and I and Reverend Al, I assume, are all vaccinated. How long do we need to go for, the believers to look at us and say, well, they're not turned into government zombies. They didn't die.
Let's pick a couple of numbers. Let's say that 15% of the people that have vaccine hesitancy in the black community have it because of these past horrific.
Is that pretty close to what you read?
I don't know. I didn't read anything about it. I just know about this. So I'm just making a number up. So let's say that 15% of the people that don't want to get vaccinated this time around are doing that because they know of the horrific experimentation that was done on especially black people in past situations like this. And you got to get through this, so let's say it's another 4 years before this is completely gone and kind of moving down the pike.
I hope you're wrong about that.
I do too, Travis. And then the next time something like this comes up and says, hey, you need to get vaccinated, it won't be 15%. It'll be 8.5%. But it'll still be some people. And that damage is long term, and there's no magic bullet for it. You get what I'm saying? Yeah,
I mean, that's not an angle that my brain even would go to, and I guess the good news in all that is it sounds like everything that you just said is not the driving factor. It's the smaller number of the people who are not being vaccinated. But go back to the question I asked. Do we just need this massive campaign of everybody coming together to say, I mean, they're doing that.
Yeah, but I think that somehow through threats, through legislation, I don't know, public pressure, you have to get the media, the social media sites to aggressively get this bad information off their sites. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care what anybody says, they have more money than God. And so here's what it takes for them.
Is God even real?
Does anybody know what time it is? I
got to tell you about this other book I'm reading.
Okay.
I'll tell you off the air.
Boy, that blew right out of my head. But,
they have more money than God. They can do something about it.
They could stop it.
So let's say they stopped it. That's maybe another way to ask the question.
So stop it, sort of stop it, whatever the effect of all the pressure on Facebook and Twitter and all this is going to be. That's all you can do.
Is that enough, though?
Well, I mean, I do not think that there is any way to fix the damage done by the misinformation that has already been spewed out over several years by Facebook. At first, not on purpose, and then certainly after Zuckerberg back in 2015 was informed of the bad players that were surfacing on Facebook, and he did nothing. Right?
Okay, so is back to the specifics about the vaccine.
Yeah.
Am I understanding this correctly that there's so much damage done that if they literally just cut the cord and there's not any news about the vaccine, not positive, not negative, if they just cut the cord and those social media platforms post nothing about it, is the damage done to where it's not going to correct itself?
It's not going to. I mean, again, I don't think it'll be unlike the other thing that we just talked about. This kind of damage just takes time, right? So I mean, as long as people, and there's a lot of them, and I agree with you, Travis, 100%, that it would be great if people took more personal responsibility about where they got their information. But there is a great deal, millions and millions and millions of people that get the bulk of their information from Facebook, from groups or news stuff or whatever. And that's because it's convenient. And maybe they're soured on the media. They've swallowed the bullshit from the Trump administration and the conservatives that all media is biased and blah, blah, blah. And so they won't watch television to get news, or they only get the bad news, right? And so they go to a place like Facebook where they think like-minded people are grouping with them, right? And then Facebook reinforces that by, if they click on a post about COVID vaccine information that's wrong, then Facebook sends 10 more posts to them with similar information. That's the wrong thing that Facebook is doing. And I think you said something like, well, it's not Facebook doing it, it's the people on Facebook. But the part that Facebook does is not post the information. It's
the AI that's attached to
pushing the 10 other posts about vaccine misinformation to that same person.
Do you think, I agree with that, but do you think that they're attaching those 10 other articles about vaccine misinformation, or is it literally just the algorithm attached to the last thing you clicked on?
It is the algorithm that Facebook. There's nobody in a control booth.
Of course.
Stuff, right? So
would the same thing happen if you clicked on, I don't know, laughing babies?
Here's the thing.
Something good.
The algorithm is specifically designed to push conflict. So laughing baby videos is not going to register with the algorithm, right? You can't offset the misinformation you get.
You can't rain blood with laughing babies.
You can't because the algorithm is more sophisticated than you might think. And here's the thing. It knows that vaccine controversial posts.
So in its AI, it's ranking. What is the word
engagement?
You use? Yeah, but you said something.
Prioritize?
No, something sinister. What did you say?
Conspiracy? I don't know.
But it's like my kids literally today are at the doctors getting shots. They're getting vaccines. Not COVID because they're too young. They're too young, but
they're going to get their other vaccines.
They got to get their shit for school.
Yeah.
And isn't that a requirement? So for our kids in public school, it's a requirement. They've had every vaccine up to this point that they've needed to have. And they'll continue to do so, and we do it anyway. But it's also a requirement for all the public schools. All of the other kids that are at that school will be required to be vaccinated, or they can't go. So it's kind of mind-boggling to me when you talk about this conversation across this country, the large amounts of people that won't get vaccinated. It just seems to me that there's some way that they would be affected, whether they are parents of children like mine that would have to get vaccines to go to school. And so how long can they hold out? Would it be, does their place of employment require them? Is it their college education? It just seems to me there's so many ways that they'll ultimately come in to affect people that they're not going to be able to hold out forever.
Well, I mean, it's I think that's probably true, but the real question is, while that's happening, and the time for that to happen is kind of unknown, but it'll be a significant amount of time. Is that going to be enough time for the Delta variant to mutate again in these large pockets of unvaccinated infection? And that's what's going to happen. And so Delta variant is ballpark 200 times more infectious than the COVID-19. If the next variant is 400 times, we're fucked. I mean, it's that.
Well, we're not fucked.
Well, here's what we know, that our vaccines are probably going to protect us even if we get the Delta variant from serious illness and hospitalization.
And death.
No such protection is guaranteed from the next variant. I mean, the vaccines that we've already taken or that we might be willing to booster in the face of a second variant may or may not be effective. So here's the thing. We could stop the mutation by reaching a high enough vaccination rate. These fucking idiots are going to be the reason why that doesn't happen.
Let me ask you a hypothetical. Not that this is experimental, but would you be willing to take experimental drugs if you had an ailment that you might die from?
For what? For a vaccine?
Well, I just mean like if you had some ailment, you were dying. You hear these stories about people
had terminal
have
cancer, and someone said, "Hey, this is an experimental drug. We don't know what the side effects are, but there's a 10% chance it's going to help you with the cancer." I'm all in. I'm taking it. Yeah. Would I take an experimental vaccine drug that so how experimental, right? It has this emergency authorization. It has it's a witch doctor in Zimbabwe that came up with it. I don't know. I think I would be careful.
What's the connection? Is it because in the cancer example, let's say it's terminal, so it's like, hey, I'm going to die anyway, so there's nothing I wouldn't try that could possibly save me?
Yeah, I mean, I think because the 10% chance of that having, let's say, curing your cancer, if that's what you're saying, is pretty damn good, right? Is it a 2% chance? Well, I mean, if it's not going to cut the time I have left, in half or something. I mean, if there's a 98% chance it's not going to work and that's it, yeah, I'm going to take it for the 2% chance that it does work. If there's a 98% chance it's going to kill me as soon as I take it, I mean, so there's a lot to that question. So, I mean, does that relate to why people might be opting to not take the vaccine now?
I don't know, but I just can't help but wonder if, I mean, you brought this up, and it was not previously on my radar, the amount of people that are just anti-vax in general in this country, which I guess is a pretty large movement. I didn't have any prior knowledge of that.
Yeah.
But I can't help but wonder how much of it is tied to the fact that people think that COVID isn't that deadly. So to them, is it really something they have to go do because, the alternative isn't the terminal cancer?
It's like a really really strong flu, or
is that your Trump impression?
Yeah, I can't do it anymore. I don't have a good Trump impersonation. I mean, oh my God, why would anybody have that idea? There was Leslie, there was a full 12 months of Trump telling people from the bully pulpit of the presidency that COVID was just not really that big a deal. And even you appear to believe that. So I also heard some of the same people over the weekend being interviewed by reporters going, "How come you're not getting the vaccination?" And they're like, I'm a pretty healthy person. I don't have any underlying conditions. I think I'm not going to take it. And I just don't.
But you're right. I was one of those people, still am, that believes without a shadow of a doubt COVID isn't the thing that we all made it into. And I don't mean to get into a whole debate about that or dismiss the number of people that have died and all that. All of the chain reactions of decisions that were made based on COVID, to me, were overblown. But what I always said from the very beginning is I'll take a vaccine. And remember, this talk about a vaccine was like, we always thought it was years out. So for me, it's in line, give me the shot like I get all my other shots. And if there's anything that gets me my freedoms back, I mean, listen, I think the government's bullshit, but I'm not looking to break the law. So, you're taking away all these freedoms. If I can get those back in a way that is peaceful, give me the goddamn shot. So I think you can certainly be both of those things. But I just wonder how much of the movement is tied to people believing that it's a vaccine for something that really doesn't exist.
I have a hard time. I mean, I don't really understand where people that have this anti-vaccine viewpoint, where they have come from, right? Somehow I think they all live in Waco or something, right? So I don't understand that part of the population, right? I mean, and when you see glimpses of them on TV or something, I mean, it depends who they pick to put up there, right, as an example of someone that's anti-vaccine. But typically, it's a thin, blonde, white woman with 3 or 4 kids in her upper middle class house out in the suburbs in Kentucky. And that's the person that
that's not the one I use. The ones that I see are usually males. There's a lot of mullets going on and tank tops.
Well, I've seen some of those too, just over the weekend, right? And so these are the ones for me. Those are the ones that are not really part of the anti-vaxxing thing, but they're currently anti-vaxxers, right? Because they're against the thing. But that group, those guys are against it because Biden's for it more than anything, right? And so I think that it's not. I don't think there's going to be a whole bunch of straight lines. Like I don't think every anti-vaxxer there's a straight line that connects them to Donald Trump. I think there's a curly Q line that goes up above everybody's head that pierces all of the bad information floating around that came out during Trump's time, and has been picked up on by a lot of that far right wing kind of part of it, and it just circles back. And even though Trump has said, yeah, you probably should get the vaccine, and I've taken it, and that doesn't matter. And just like having Jesse Jackson or the Reverend Al go out and tell black people, hey, nobody's doing gonorrhea experiments on you with this vaccine. It's okay, you can take it. But that doesn't fix it. Neither does Trump.
But what I'm hearing you say, or the lack of what I've heard you say, is what is the solution?
No, unfortunately, there's like so many things, there isn't a magic bullet for this.
Well, I don't mean magic, but there's got to be steps. Well, I guess,
hey,
last week's episode was glass half empty. Let's flip it, glass half full. Well, what steps can be taken?
Well, the steps that can be taken is the public can pressure the media platforms to stop with the misinformation about vaccines. They can stop allowing anti-vaxxing groups to coalesce on their platforms. They have no responsibility to do that. If they continue to do it, they do it by choice, right? And they do it on purpose. And so right now they could stop that today, and they should. And nobody cares where the anti-vaxxers go to, have camaraderie and fellowship and whatever. Nobody gives a shit. Do
you think a lot of these groups are highly religious?
I think a lot of it has some stupid connection to that. And but here's the thing: the government can't do it, right? The government cannot. That is a violation of First Amendment and freedom of speech. So it's not the government. The government can make regulations that Facebook has to live by, but none of that's going to happen anytime soon. And so right now, Facebook, Twitter, Dribble, whatever the fuck's left out there, they need to do it on their own. We need to pressure them as the public. But remember, unfortunately, we would like to say, hey, as consumers, we can put pressure on Facebook. Remember, we're not consumers. We're product. We're Facebook's product. They produce us for advertisers and sell us to them. They don't extract money from us.
Go back to what you said
customers.
About putting pressure. Isn't the ultimate form of pressure if
public opinion?
Yeah, by way of people boycotting the platform, because the whole reason that Facebook can command
boycotts don't work, but
yeah, but they do, because Facebook, to my knowledge, is still a free platform, but it's all numbers based, right? They can go take the data to the advertisers and say this many people in this demographic go to our site and click on this, this, and this, and that's how they monetize it. But if those numbers went away,
well, here's the thing: the people that don't agree with how Facebook does things are already off the platform, right? So the people that are left that you're saying, hey, they could make it, they could, but they probably won't, because they're there for the confrontation. They're there for the
to stoke the fire.
Yeah. I mean, they're there for the engagement, right? They want to be engaged, and so it's not likely that they're going to make it known to Facebook that they don't want to see anti-vax information, because for a lot of them, they think that they think it's some kind of First Amendment thing, right? That it's some kind of some kind of free speech issue, and it's not. It's nothing to do with it, right? So that's one thing that can happen. Liability somehow. But I mean, really, it's up to the platforms, right? They talk about being socially responsible and here for the good of society and the good of mankind, and we can do world-changing things. I mean, that just came out of Zuckerberg's face a couple of weeks ago.
Is he building a rocket too?
Do it. Yeah, for his ego, for his head. So, I mean, that can do it. And then what you've been seeing is what can be done, right? Just have to offset the bad information by people with good reputations, just saying it enough times. So, I mean, it's just going to take time. I mean, to undo the bad, it's harder to undo this than it was to fuck it up. I'm sure of that. So, I mean, look, vaccination is the way. This is the way for this country to get out from under this pandemic, and there is no other way. So, for anybody that's choosing not to participate, you're just being selfish fucks, and that's it.
Well, I think it's not just this country too, right? I mean, vaccination rates around the world are pretty low in some countries. So
that's for lack of having vaccines.
Exactly.
Right?
And it's kind of,
we have them.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think a lot of it remains to be seen if there will be a similar anti-vax movement in other countries when they start to roll out vaccines. But I don't disagree with what you said about what can be done or should be done on these platforms.
Those are good questions.
My gut tells me that it probably isn't going to make that big of an impact for whatever reason. I think people believe already what they believe, and there's not going to be a lot of changes.
No, this damage is done. I mean, it's done. In so much of this, I mean, that's kind of, we talked a little bit earlier, like I was saying, like kind of I was, if I seemed more negative or, I'm a little fatigued by the amount of damage that's been done by world events, especially U.S. politics during, before, during the campaign for, during the administration, and in this last 6-8 months, because so much of it I just know that it's been very damaging. And we often ask, and sometimes you ask, and I don't think for any nefarious reason, the legitimate ask, how do you quantify it? What's really the damage that's been done? Well, this is one of the things, right? And so some of the damage that's been done is not evident till something happens, right? So we couldn't tell what damage was being done to the willingness of American people to coalesce and get vaccinated to stomp out this virus and stop it from mutating. We did not know. Now that we've gone through, now that the vaccines have become available, and everybody could get one at will, now we know.
Are you finding yourself in your outer orbit of having to convince people to get it?
I'm not telling people to get the vaccine. I mean, outside of this podcast, and that's a good thing about this, it's making it easier for me in my everyday life to live and let live. I mean, I'm not the police, right, of the world.
Yeah, but do you know people that you in your circle that aren't getting it?
Yeah, but so a couple of people that I that hadn't got it when I thought they probably would have or should have have since gotten it, and not everybody. So there's still people that I think are just have issues with it, right? And I don't think that, just like I wouldn't try to convince somebody to give up their religious beliefs because
why not?
Because I don't believe in magic or whatever, right? So I feel, and I think there are different reasons, right? That we've talked about some of them, and sometimes people acquire beliefs the way they acquire religious beliefs, and when that's the case,
it's blind faith.
The things that we've talked about here, I can explain to that person a zillion times how it's going to come back to affect me, the fact that they won't get, and that they promote anti-vaxxing.
So you're saying there's nothing they will see. There's no no proof, if you will, that you could show that person.
When was the last time you talked to someone that is religious and you said, "Hey,
Jesus didn't walk on water.
Yeah, nobody's ever seen
Moses
God.
didn't part the Red Sea.
Yeah, where's the empirical proof?
Jesus stole everything from Dionysus. There's no
was the last
Jesus.
When was the last time you had that conversation with that religious person and they went, "Holy shit, Travis, you're right. I don't believe anymore." I mean,
maybe I just need more time with them.
I don't think so. And for me, when it comes to religion, I don't care if they change their mind or not. I mean, I said this before, I don't believe the world would be a better place at this moment if I could instantly make religious go away. If I could snap my fingers and make everybody stop believing, I think it might be chaos.
I don't think so. There's a way around that.
There's a change. That would be a change that, if it ever comes, needs to come gradually and with some kind of order behind it, right? People need time to replace because here's the thing. And here's why I'm not even sure that would be, if I had that ability, and if I could even snap my fingers and make it a long-term thing, if they don't replace it with something else, they're going to go nuts, because people don't do well when they're afraid.
Well,
of dying.
If you could snap your fingers
Yeah.
and you had two choices, undo religion instantly or get all the unvaccinated people vaccinated, what would it be?
Ooh, right now, today?
Yeah,
it would be get everybody to vaccinate. Yeah, because I do think that making religion disappear, religious belief among the world population, instantly, overnight, then two things would happen. One, we'd still have COVID. And two, great parts of this world would collapse, right? And especially, we'd be okay here in Orange County, maybe because
we're all pagans.
Yeah, we're all pagans anyway, and even the people that go to church don't really mean it. And so, but I mean, if you were to take away the religious beliefs of people in, the poorer quarters of the world, especially Catholics and Christians and Muslims around the world, it's their religion is the only thing in their shitty living conditions that gets them through the day. I mean, and I wouldn't want to take that away from them, abruptly. Right. But
you give them something in return. Give them like an iPad or something. Welcome to technology. Oh, by the way, there's no Jesus.
They all have iPads and they watch, I was, I don't think I want to mention any names, but family gathering and several people there that were religious. And I heard, as that little group of the family was having a quick discussion kind of amongst themselves at one end of the table, I heard this and I was a little taken aback, and I never had a chance to ask anybody about it. And I think several of the people in this conversation are listeners. So I'm going to say this, maybe you'll recognize having this conversation, but I'm not going to use your names. But I heard someone say, "Hey, I think we're in the end times." And I didn't get the rest of the conversation. So I don't know if that was a remark coming off
politically,
the political
Jesus, yeah.
The people in this conversation were religiously aligned, but not politically aligned. So I'm really not sure, right, where that was coming from. In fact, the preceding conversation had something to do with you shouldn't watch Fox News. And so,
well, that would be like kind of one of your canned responses about Fox News. We're in the end times if you watch Fox News.
Yeah. I find that whole concept of end times to be kind of fascinating, and it's a much bigger part of organized religion than all of us secular, non-religious people understand, right? And so that was no conversation that anybody involved in it wanted to bring to the bigger group. It was something they were commenting on to each other casually, and that's what kind of took me back. It's like, whoa, you think we're in the end times, and you want to know what kind of ice cream we're having for dessert? I think if
kind of not on the same weight, right?
I know if I was of the mind that we were actually in the end times, that the end of the world was actually upon us, and something I might see in my lifetime, I'd be more concerned. So I don't understand it, but I just thought it was an interesting observation. And for those of you that were involved in that conversation, if you happen to remember it, not criticizing you, just interested in, what it came up, and not something I ever thought that I would just hear in casual conversation.
Well, you should inquire and then report back.
Yeah, everybody in this conversation had a college education too. So I don't know.
Well, that doesn't mean anything.
No, not really. I mean, I often think we're in the end times too, but in a different way. I mean, who the hell knows, right? You know that. I don't know. You know, do you ever wonder why Christian religious leaders are so anxious to buddy up with Israel, and Jewish religious? Do you know the reason? Well,
first you asked, do I ever wonder? Yeah, I don't spend any amount of wonder at all on that.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you see some obviously anti-Semitic issue happening and you see Christian leaders rushing to give support to or join ranks with Jewish religious leaders, does it ever make you wonder why that would be the case?
It's got to be for some control reason.
Well, remember, Christians believe that we can't have the rapture, right? Until the Jews voluntarily convert to Christianity. So at some point, they feel they have to bring them along to the Christian side.
Yeah, something tells me that's not going to happen.
Well, I mean, it doesn't increase my belief that rapture's coming anytime soon. I mean, I don't see anybody in Israel making that conversion, but I don't think that's a widespread piece of knowledge, right? So, I mean, Muslims don't believe that. So as far as they're concerned, the best way to take care of Israel is to kill them all, right? And I did happen to watch, I watched a movie about about Israelis in I'm going to get this wrong, in South America. Can't remember the country. When they found Adolf Eichmann, the guy whose nickname was the architect of the final solution for the Jewish problem.
It was after the war, then they all fled to South America.
Many of them did, right? I mean, some of the top leaders committed suicide, right? Adolf Hitler and the other ones. But Adolf Eichmann was long thought, and in 1960 they located him in South America, and then a team of Mossad agents spirited him out of the country on El Al and took him to Israel and tried him and hung him. So it was an interesting movie. So I was watching a lot of that last night. That was yesterday. That was last night, I think. I felt something light and breezy to watch.
Yeah, a good Sunday evening watch.
But that other thing about how the Christians need to get the Jews to convert for the rapture to come. There's a large segment of Christians that believe that that's not going to happen until they accomplish that. That's a chore they've been given by God, and if they don't accomplish it, then they don't deserve to be lifted up.
And the whole thing is just ridiculous. It's how I view politics. It's one side trying to convince the other side that you got to live the way I want you to live.
Right. It's all about
just
control.
Leave fucking people alone.
I mean, for me and religion, I realized that a long time ago, and that's one of the things that early on made me dislike religion, organized religion. And again, so I wouldn't jump at the chance to end it all, like you said. Because I think there's a lot of bad stuff that would happen in connection with that. And if you're giving me the chance to eradicate COVID by getting everybody to vaccinate, yeah, I'm taking that.
I'll give you another comparison maybe 6 months from now.
Okay, let me know. So, I just think that that's a fascinating part of that I think a great deal, especially secular people, are not aware of. And it does have a lot of influence on international political interaction between religious groups, right? And so,
well, we could do another 2 hours on religion alone. But speaking of end times, let's take this opportunity to recognize the end time, my friend.
All right, excellent. Thanks,
Good stuff as always.
Yep. See you later.